This is it. After weeks of explosive testimony and shocking twists, the judge has reached a verdict in the case against Amy Slaton. We have the result, and his final words to both Amy and Michael will send chills down your spine. The legal battle that has torn a family apart and captivated a nation of viewers has finally reached its crescendo. What you are about to hear is the culmination of everything, the final judgment that will change the Slaton family forever. The stakes have never been higher, and the conclusion is something no one, and I mean no one, saw coming. This story is about to break wide open. The information we have is exclusive, and you will not find it anywhere else. To make sure you are on the front lines for every shocking development that is about to come, you need to do one thing right now. Hit that like button to signal you are ready for the truth, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications. The verdict is just the beginning, and you do not want to miss a single second of what happens next. The final moments in that courtroom were a study in pure, unadulterated tension. Our sources inside describe the air as being thick and heavy, so quiet you could hear a pin drop on the worn linoleum floor. The gallery was packed to capacity, a tense sea of familiar faces and whispering journalists. On one side, you had what remained of Team Amy. Her sister Tammy was there, a pillar of unexpected strength. Her transformation has been about more than just weight loss. In that moment, she was a guardian. Her eyes locked on her younger sister, projecting a silent force of support that was almost tangible. Chris was beside her, his arms crossed, his face a grim mask of stoicism, but his knuckles were white. He was the family's rock, and that rock was feeling the pressure of the mountain that was about to fall. They were a small, beleaguered unit, huddled together against the storm that had been raging for months. And on the other side, there was Michael Slaton. He wasn't surrounded by family. He sat alone with his legal counsel, a solitary figure staring straight ahead, his expression utterly unreadable. It was the same blank, emotionless facade he had maintained throughout this entire ordeal. Was it the cool confidence of a man who knew he was about to win? Or was it the hollow emptiness of a man who knew he had gone too far, who had burned every bridge and was now standing on an island of his own making? His posture was rigid, his hands resting on his knees. He didn't look at Amy. He didn't look at the gallery. He just stared at the judge's empty chair, waiting. And then there was Amy. Amy Slaton was, by all accounts, a wreck. She was trembling, a visible tremor running through her hands, which she had clasped together so tightly they were bloodless. She was trying to be brave, trying to project an image of a mother fighting for her children, but the fear was radiating off her in waves. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, darting from her lawyer to the judge's bench, to the cold, unforgiving face of the man she once loved, the father of her two boys. Every nightmare she had endured for the past several months, every accusation, every piece of her private life dissected under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. It had all led to this single, terrifying moment. The weight of it all was physically present on her shoulders. She looked smaller, more fragile than ever before. This wasn't a reality TV star anymore. This was a mother on the brink of losing everything. The bailiff's voice boomed through the silence. "All rise." The sound of dozens of people scraping their chairs back was the only noise as the judge, a stern, older man with a reputation for no-nonsense justice, swept into the room in his black robes. He didn't smile. He didn't look at the lawyers. He sat down, the heavy thud of his chair echoing in the chamber, and stared out at the two people at the center of this hurricane. The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched for what felt like an eternity. Every person in that room held their breath. This was it. The judge picked up a thick stack of papers, the official report on the case, and let it drop onto his desk with a thud that made Amy jump. He began to speak, his voice low and gravelly, cutting through the tension like a knife. "I have presided over this court for 32 years, he said, his eyes scanning the faces of Amy and Michael. I have seen cases of theft, of violence, of corporate greed, and of heartbreaking tragedy. But rarely," he paused, letting the word hang in the air, "have I seen a case so thoroughly saturated in the toxic brine of public performance, mutual animosity, and what appears to be a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept of truth." He looked down at the mountain of paperwork, the conflicting evidence, the sworn affidavits that contradicted each other, the character witnesses who seemed to be describing two entirely different sets of people. Before I deliver my verdict, the judge continued, I want to address the nature of the information presented to this court. We have been inundated with a deluge of evidence. We have text messages, secretly recorded audio, photographs, third-hand accounts, and a seemingly endless parade of he said, she said. It is a tangled, ugly web of accusations, and it is this court's job to untangle it. The room was frozen. This was not the standard legal preamble. This was a dressing down. The judge was setting the stage, and it was clear he was not impressed by what he had seen from either side. He was looking at the very core of the case, the foundation upon which Michael had built his entire argument, and he was about to set it on fire. The insider report on the judgment, which we have obtained from sources with direct knowledge of the proceedings, is where this story takes its first shocking turn. The judge picked up a specific document, and everyone knew which one it was. It was the police report, the cornerstone of Michael's most damning accusation. Mr. Slaton, the judge began, his voice taking on a harder edge as he addressed Michael directly for the first time. You came before this court and before law enforcement with an accusation of the most serious nature. You alleged that the defendant, Mr. Slaton, was in possession of and potentially distributing felony-level narcotics. An accusation that could not only strip a mother of her children permanently, but could also result in a lengthy prison sentence. He let that sink in. He made sure everyone in that room, including Michael, understood the gravity of the charge that had been leveled. He was not just talking about a messy custody battle. He was talking about an attempt to put Amy Slaton in a cage. This court, the judge continued, his voice rising with controlled indignation, has reviewed the evidence you provided to substantiate this claim. We have reviewed the chain of custody, or rather, the complete and utter lack thereof. We have reviewed the context, the timing, and the presentation of this supposed evidence. And we have reached a conclusion that is as clear as it is disturbing. He looked directly at Michael, his eyes like steel. This case, as it pertains to the felony drug charges, is a cesspool of accusations and manipulations. A collective gasp went through the gallery. This was not the language of a dispassionate legal ruling. This was the language of a man who was personally offended by what he had seen. The evidence provided by you, Mr. Slaton, the judge said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl, is deemed by this court to be of a highly suspicious and profoundly self-serving nature. He slammed the file down on his desk. The claim that you discovered these substances in a manner that was both innocent and coincidental, at the precise moment you needed leverage in a custody dispute, strains credulity to its breaking point. The narrative you have woven is flimsy, riddled with inconsistencies, and frankly, it is an insult to the intelligence of this court and to the very principles of justice. He wasn't finished. He turned his attention to the other pillars of Michael's case. Then we have the matter of the leaked text messages and the secret audio recordings. He shook his head slowly, a look of deep disappointment on his face. The act of secretly recording a private conversation with the mother of your children, with the clear intent of using her words against her in a court of law, is a deeply troubling act. It speaks to a level of duplicity and premeditation that this court finds repugnant. The text messages, presented without context, clipped and curated to paint a specific, damning portrait of Ms. Slaton, are a classic example of manipulation. You have taken moments of anger, of frustration, of a woman clearly at the end of her rope, and you have attempted to weaponize them, to twist them into something they are not. You have used her pain as your sword. The courtroom was in a state of shock. Michael Slaton, who had entered the room as the stoic, aggrieved party, was being systematically dismantled by the highest authority in the room. The judge was not just questioning his evidence. He was questioning his character, his motives, his entire strategy. Amy was no longer trembling. She was staring at the judge, tears now streaming silently down her face. But these were not tears of fear. They were tears of vindication. For the first time in months, someone in a position of power was seeing through the narrative that had been constructed to destroy her. Therefore, the judge announced, his voice booming with finality, regarding the felony charge of drug possession with intent to distribute, this court finds the evidence to be entirely without merit, unreliable, and indicative of malicious intent. On this charge, the court dismissed the case against Ms. Slaton entirely. The charges dropped. The sound in the courtroom was a tidal wave of emotion. A sob escaped Amy's lips, a raw, ragged sound of pure, unadulterated relief. Tammy let out a whoop of joy, quickly stifling it with her hand, her eyes shining with tears. Chris put his arm around his sister, pulling her into a tight embrace. The legal team for Amy was beaming, patting her on the back. It was the victory they had been fighting for, the moment they had prayed for. The darkest cloud, the threat of prison, the accusation that had threatened to define and destroy her, was gone. It had evaporated in the fire of the judge's words. Michael, for his part, did not move. His face remained a mask, but a single muscle in his jaw twitched. A tiny, almost imperceptible betrayal of the rage boiling just beneath the surface. He had thrown his most powerful punch, and the judge had just told him it was not only a miss but a foul. But then, the judge held up a hand, and the celebration in the room died in an instant. The silence that returned was even more profound than before. The relief on Amy's face was replaced by a flicker of confusion and renewed fear. The judge's expression had not softened. If anything, it had become even more severe. "But," he said, the word cutting through the still reverberating victory, "he's not done." This is where the twist in the verdict comes in, the part that ensures this story is far from a simple, happy ending. The judge turned his gaze, which had been fixed on Michael, and locked it onto Amy. The brief moment of warmth and vindication in the room vanished, replaced by an icy chill. "Ms. Slaton," he said, his voice returning to a formal, measured tone. Amy's brief smile faltered. She straightened up, her lawyer placing a calming hand on her arm. "While this court has unequivocally rejected the more sensational and frankly unbelievable accusations brought against you," the judge stated, "the court cannot and will not ignore the substantial body of evidence concerning the environment in which your children were living. We are not talking about accusations, Ms. Slaton. We are talking about documented facts. We are talking about the undisputed state of your home." He gestured to another file on his desk, this one filled with photographs. The infamous photos, the ones that had been circulated, debated, and analyzed by millions. The images of a home in chaos, clutter, dirt, disorganization. A reality that, unlike the drug charges, could not be so easily dismissed or attributed to malicious framing. The arguments made by your defense that you were a single mother under immense stress, that you were dealing with the collapse of your marriage, and that you were overwhelmed are all noted by this court. We have taken them into consideration. We have empathy for your situation. The judge paused. But empathy does not absolve you of responsibility. The primary duty of this court, above all else, is the welfare of the two young children at the center of this circus. Amy's heart sank. She knew what was coming. The one area where she had no defense, the one truth that she could not deny. The condition of the house was a failure, her failure, and she knew it. "The documented state of the home," the judge continued, his voice leaving no room for argument, "the clear and present chaos surrounding these children represents a failure to provide a stable and safe environment. It is not a crime born of malice, perhaps, but it is a form of neglect nonetheless. The welfare of Gage and Glenn Slaton is paramount, and it is clear to this court that the environment they were in was not conducive to their well-being." He looked at Amy, his expression one of stern disappointment. "Therefore, while the felony charges dropped, this court finds you guilty of a lesser misdemeanor charge of child endangerment." The word guilty hit Amy like a physical blow. Even though the felony was gone, the stain of this remained. She was, in the eyes of the law, guilty. She had endangered her children. The shame was a fresh, hot wave that washed over her. Michael's expression remained unchanged, but there was a glint of something in his eyes now. Not victory, perhaps, but satisfaction. He had not won the war, but he had won this battle. He had managed to brand her, to get a legal judgment confirming his narrative that she was an unfit mother. The judge wasn't finished. He immediately moved to the sentencing. "The penalty for this offense will not be jail time," he said, and a small measure of relief returned to Amy and her family. "However, it will be significant, and it will be strict. Ms. Slaton, you are hereby sentenced to 2 years of supervised probation. During this period, you will be subject to random, unannounced home inspections by a representative of Child Protective Services. Any failure to maintain a clean, safe, and stable home for your children will be considered a violation of this probation and will have immediate and severe consequences. He looked from Amy to Michael, bringing them both back into the fold. Furthermore, this court orders both of you, Ms. Slaton and Mr. Slaton, to enroll in and complete a state-supervised co-parenting program. You will attend these classes together. You will learn to communicate civilly and effectively for the sake of your children. You will learn to put their needs above your own egos and your own animosity. This is not a request. It is a court order. Failure to comply by either party will be seen as contempt of court. This part of the sentence was a masterstroke of judicial punishment. He wasn't just penalizing Amy, he was chaining her to Michael in a forced therapeutic setting. For two people who could barely stand to be in the same room, the idea of sitting in mandatory classes together, dissecting their failures as parents under the watchful eye of a state-appointed counselor, was a unique form of hell. It was a sentence designed not just to punish, but to force a change, however painful it might be. The verdict was a complicated one. It was a win and a loss for both sides. Amy was free from the threat of prison, her name cleared of the most heinous accusation. But she was now a convicted offender, on probation, her ability as a mother officially called into question and placed under the microscope of the state. Michael had failed in his ultimate goal of destroying her, but he had succeeded in wounding her, in securing a legal judgment that validated, at least in part, his public crusade against her. The courtroom was a swirl of conflicting emotions: relief, disappointment, anger, and confusion. It seemed like a messy, unsatisfying end to a messy, unsatisfying case. But the judge, the master of this courtroom theater, had saved his final, most shocking act for last. He let the weight of the sentence settle over the room. He let Amy process her guilt and her freedom. He let Michael process his partial victory and his ultimate failure. And then, when he had their complete and undivided attention, he delivered the final warning, the new cliffhanger that would change everything once again. And then, the final chilling warning. The judge, his face a mask of grim finality, looked at both Amy and Michael. He didn't seem to be looking at a plaintiff and a defendant anymore. He was looking at two parents who had lost their way, two people who had dragged their private war into his public courtroom and turned it into a spectacle. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial tone that somehow carried more weight than any shout ever could. "This," he said, each word a perfectly placed stone building a wall between the past and the future, "circus ends today." The word circus hung in the air, a perfect and damning indictment of the entire affair. He was talking about the social media battles, the YouTube confessionals, the whispered campaigns, and the public trial by media that had run parallel to his own legal proceedings. He saw it all, and he was disgusted. "For months," he continued, his gaze sweeping from Amy's tear-streaked face to Michael's stony facade, "you have used your children as pawns in a game of public relations. You have aired your grievances on every platform available to you. You have curated narratives, leaked private moments, and encouraged your respective followers to engage in a vicious proxy war. You have forgotten that at the heart of this are two little boys who did not ask for their lives to become a reality show. They deserve a childhood free from this noise, free from this poison. And this court is going to give it to them." The finality in his tone was absolute. This was no longer about a verdict. This was about a fundamental reset. "Therefore, effective immediately, I am placing both of you, Ms. Slaton and Mr. Slaton, under a strict and binding gag order." A new shockwave rippled through the gallery, a gag order. It was a legal move that was both common and, in this context, devastatingly significant. This means you will no longer speak about this case, about each other, or about the particulars of your custody arrangement in any public forum. That includes television programs, that includes YouTube, that includes Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or any other platform that may be invented tomorrow. You will not give interviews, you will not issue statements through proxies, you will not post cryptic messages or inspirational quotes aimed at one another. You will maintain a complete and total public silence on this matter. Is that understood? He stared them down, demanding and receiving a mumbled, "Yes, Your Honor," from both Amy and her lawyer, and a curt nod from Michael. "The penalty for violating this order is contempt of court," the judge added, his voice like ice, And I assure you, I do not take contempt of court lightly. It will result in fines and it can result in jail time. The circus is closed. It seemed like the end. A harsh, but perhaps necessary conclusion. Amy was on probation. They were both sentenced to co-parenting classes, and now they were silenced. The drama, at least the public part of it, was over. The reporters in the gallery were already scribbling furiously, crafting the headlines. But the judge hadn't banged his gavel. He held his hand poised over it, a silent, menacing promise of one last thunderclap. He turned his full attention back to Michael Slaton, and the entire atmosphere of the room shifted. If Michael had felt a shred of satisfaction from Amy's misdemeanor conviction, it was about to be burned to ash. "And know this, Mr. Slaton," the judge said, his voice now devoid of any emotion but a cold, righteous fury. The man who had entered the court as the accuser, the one holding all the cards, suddenly looked very small in his chair. "This court does not take kindly to being manipulated. The law is not a tool to be used for personal vendettas. The justice system is not a weapon to be wielded in a custody dispute." He paused, letting the weight of his words crush the air out of the room. "I have reviewed your testimony under oath. I have reviewed the police report you filed. I have reviewed the evidence you brought forth in an attempt to secure a felony conviction against the mother of your children. And in light of my finding that this evidence was highly suspicious, self-serving, and indicative of malicious intent, I am left with a very serious concern." Amy was watching, her mind struggling to catch up. Tammy and Chris were leaning forward in their seats. Michael's lawyer was starting to look pale. When a citizen uses law enforcement and the courts to knowingly perpetrate a falsehood, it is an attack on the very foundations of our society. It wastes precious resources, it damages innocent lives, and it cannot be tolerated. And then came the final blow, the twist that no one saw coming, the line that would echo long after everyone had left that courtroom. "My office," the judge declared, his voice ringing with authority, "will be formally petitioning the district attorney's office to open an investigation into you, Mr. Slaton." The silence was broken by a single sharp intake of breath. It might have been Michael, it might have been his lawyer, it might have been everyone in the room at once. "An investigation," the judge clarified, leaving no room for misunderstanding, "for the crimes of perjury and the filing of a false police report." Perjury. Lying under oath. A felony. Filing a false police report. A serious crime. The very weapons Michael had tried to use against Amy were now being re-aimed directly at his own head. The hunter had, in a stunning reversal of fortune, become the hunted. The judge was not just dismissing Michael's claims, he was accusing him of committing a crime in the process of making them. He was suggesting that the entire drug plot was a fabrication, a lie told to the police, a lie told to the court, a lie told under oath. And he was now asking the chief prosecutor of the county to prove it. "This case may be over," the judge said, his eyes boring into Michael, who for the first time looked utterly terrified, his mask of composure completely shattered. "But I assure you, a new one may be about to begin." And with that, he brought the gavel down. The crack was like a gunshot, a definitive, explosive end to one chapter and the violent beginning of another. "Court is adjourned," the bailiff yelled, but it was barely heard over the eruption of noise. It was over, but it wasn't. Amy is free, but the war is just beginning. What we have just witnessed is not the end of a story, but a seismic shift in the battlefield. For months, Amy Slaton has been on the defensive, reacting to a relentless assault on her character, her freedom, and her motherhood. She was backed into a corner, fighting for her life against a man who seemed determined to see her utterly destroyed. But with one final, shocking pronouncement, that judge didn't just end the case. He flipped the entire chessboard. Michael Slaton, the aggressor, the puppet master, the man who confidently walked into court believing he held all the power, now finds himself in the crosshairs of the district attorney. The gag order was meant to end the circus, but the judge himself has just lit the fuse on a new, far more dangerous powder keg. Let's break down the immediate aftermath, the fallout from this judicial earthquake. First, the gag order. This is a strategic masterstroke by the judge, but it has massive implications. For Amy, it's a shield. Michael can no longer use social media to poison the well, to chip away at her reputation with cryptic posts and leaked information. He is legally muzzled. This gives her breathing room, a chance to focus on her probation, her parenting classes, and rebuilding her life and her home without the constant threat of a public attack. But for the viewers, for the very existence of the show that made them famous, this is a potential catastrophe. How can 1,000 Sansleby sisters continue if its central characters are legally forbidden from discussing the single most dramatic event in their recent lives? The producers at TLC must be in a state of panic. Will they have to put the show on indefinite hiatus? Will they have to film around the gigantic elephant in the room, pretending this titanic legal battle never happened? Or will they try to find a loophole, a way to tell the story without telling the story? This gag order isn't just a personal restriction. It's a threat to the Slaton family's entire media empire. And what about Amy's victory? Let's be brutally honest here. Was this truly a win? Yes, she avoided a felony conviction. Yes, she avoided prison. That is an undeniable, life-altering victory, and we cannot downplay the immense relief she must be feeling. The darkest timeline has been avoided, but look at the price. She is now a convicted offender, found guilty of child endangerment. That is a permanent mark on her record. She is on probation for 2 years, meaning a representative of the state can show up at her door, unannounced, at any time, to inspect her home and judge her fitness as a mother. She lives under a microscope. One bad day, one messy room, one moment of being overwhelmed could be interpreted as a probation violation, and she could find herself right back in front of that same judge, who has already made it clear he has no patience left. And then there's the sentence of mandatory co-parenting classes with Michael. This is, in its own way, a crueler sentence than jail time. She is being forced, by law, to sit in a room with the man who, according to the judge's own words, tried to maliciously frame her for a felony. She has to learn to co-parent with someone she now knows is capable of going to the most extreme lengths to hurt her. Can you imagine the tension in those sessions? The raw, seething animosity that will be bubbling just beneath the surface as a state-appointed therapist tries to get them to use I statements and practice active listening? It's a psychological torture chamber disguised as therapy. So, is Amy free? Yes, but she is free in a carefully constructed cage, a cage of probation, state supervision, and forced interaction with her greatest adversary. Now let's turn to the main event, the new saga. Michael Slaton, the hunter becomes the hunted. This is the story that will define the next year of the Slaton family drama. The judge's petition to the district attorney is not just a suggestion. It's a powerful recommendation from a sitting judge who has just spent weeks reviewing the intimate details of the case. Our sources, with connections deep inside the local legal community, are indicating that a petition like this, coming from a judge of his stature and accompanied by his scathing indictment of the evidence, is not something the DA's office will ignore. It is almost certain that they will open a formal investigation. So, what does that look like? First, investigators will re-examine every piece of evidence Michael submitted. That found bag of narcotics will be looked at not as evidence of Amy's crime, but as evidence of Michael's. Where did it come from? Forensic analysis could be used. Were Michael's fingerprints on the bag in a way that suggests planting rather than discovery? Who had access to the house? They will build a timeline. When did Michael claim to find it? Does it align perfectly with a moment he desperately needed leverage in the custody battle? The very convenience of the discovery now becomes suspicious. Second, they will re-interview witnesses. But this time, they won't be asking about Amy. They'll be asking about Michael. They will talk to his friends, his family, anyone he might have confided in. Did he ever express a desire to get Amy? Did he ever talk about setting her up? People who may have been loyal to him before might be far less willing to cover for him now that he's the one facing a potential felony charge. The threat of being an accessory, of being charged with conspiracy or obstruction of justice, has a remarkable way of jogging people's memories. Suddenly, Michael, who is able to control the narrative by being the sole source of information, will find himself surrounded by people being questioned by professional investigators who are trained to spot lies. And third, and most importantly, there's the perjury charge. Perjury is the act of willfully telling an untruth in a court after having taken an oath or affirmation. The judge has already laid the groundwork for this, stating that Michael's testimony about how he found the drugs strains credulity. To prove perjury, the DA will have to prove that Michael lied under oath and that he knew he was lying. They will compare his sworn testimony to the physical evidence and the testimony of other witnesses. If they can find one person who can testify that Michael admitted the drugs weren't Amy's or that he planned to plant them, the case becomes a slam dunk. Think about the delicious, terrifying irony of the situation. Michael Slaton could soon find himself sitting at the same defendant's table where Amy sat. He could be the one facing a felony charge. He could be the one looking at the possibility of a prison sentence. Everything he allegedly tried to do to Amy could boomerang back and hit him with the force of a freight train. The fear he instilled in her for months could become his own constant companion. And who would be the star witness for the prosecution in the case of the People vs. Michael Slaton? It could very well be Amy Slaton herself. The gag order applies to the previous case. A new criminal investigation is a different matter entirely. If subpoenaed to testify against Michael, Amy would not only be allowed to speak, she would be legally required to. She would be able to tell her side of the story under oath with the full power of the state backing her up. This verdict has fundamentally altered the family dynamic forever. Tammy Slaton, who has undergone a miraculous transformation, has now fully stepped into the role of the family matriarch and protector. Throughout the trial, she was Amy's rock. Now, seeing her sister vindicated and her former brother-in-law facing a criminal investigation, her position is solidified. Our sources say that Tammy is on fire, that she feels a sense of righteous fury and is determined to see Michael face consequences for what he put their family through. She is no longer the dependent sister. She is a warrior, and her primary mission is to protect Amy and those boys. Chris Combs, ever the stoic pragmatist, is likely looking at this from a strategic angle. He has always been wary of Michael, always playing the role of the reluctant but necessary mediator. Now, with Michael potentially being neutralized by the legal system, Chris can focus on what he does best, rebuilding. He will be the one helping Amy navigate her probation, helping her keep the house in order, providing the stable male influence that Gage and Glenn desperately need. The verdict has, in essence, removed the family's primary antagonist from their immediate lives and replaced him with a new, shared objective, supporting Amy and ensuring Michael's new legal troubles are seen through to their just conclusion. What will Michael do now? His back is against the wall. His credibility has been destroyed in a court of law. His character has been assassinated by a judge, and he is facing a criminal investigation that could ruin his life. A man like that, a man who has demonstrated a willingness to go to extreme lengths, is a dangerous man. Will he lash out? Will he try to find a way to violate the gag order and spin this new development to his followers? Will he try to intimidate potential witnesses, or will he crumble? Will the pressure be too much? The confident, stoic mask he wore for so long has been ripped away, and what lies beneath is something we have not yet truly seen. But we will. The investigation will expose everything. This story has evolved. It began as a messy divorce, a tragic but all too common tale of a family falling apart. It became a spectacle, a public feud fueled by social media and reality television. Then it became a legal thriller, a courtroom drama with shocking twists and turns. And now it has become a story of justice and consequence. It is about whether the system, which can be so easily manipulated, can also correct itself. It is about whether a person can use the law as a sword to harm another without getting cut by the blade themselves. The judge's final warning was not just a warning to Michael, it was a message to everyone. A message that the truth, however buried under lies and manipulations, has a way of coming to the light. And a message that in the end, the welfare of two innocent children outweighs all the drama, all the ratings, and all the public feuds in the world. He has closed the circus tent, but in doing so, he has pointed a spotlight at the one person who thought he was safe in the shadows, running the show. And now that person has nowhere left to hide. Amy is free, but the war is just beginning. Was this the right verdict? It was complex, messy, and it left no one truly unscathed. Was it fair? The judge seemed to believe so, delivering punishment and the threat of punishment to both sides based on their specific actions. And what do you think will happen when Michael is investigated? Will the DA find enough evidence to charge him? Will he face the same legal terror he allegedly tried to inflict on Amy? This story is far from over. A new chapter has just begun, and it promises to be the most explosive one yet. Subscribe right now because my next investigation will be Michael Slaton, the hunter becomes the hunted, and you need to be here for every single shocking revelation. The gavel has fallen, but the echoes will shake this family for years to come. Let's go deeper into the immediate aftermath, into the raw, unfiltered moments that transpired as soon as the judge's gavel fell. Because the story told by the cameras outside the courthouse is only a fraction of the truth, we have the inside track, the details from those who were in the eye of the storm. As the courtroom erupted into chaos, a tale of two very different realities began to unfold. On one side, you had Amy's camp. It was not the wild, triumphant celebration you might expect. The relief was there, yes, it was a palpable, physical thing. It was in the way Amy's shoulders finally slumped, releasing months of tension she probably didn't even know she was carrying. It was in the deep, shuddering breaths she took as Chris and Tammy formed a human shield around her, protecting her from the prying eyes and the lingering chill of Michael's stare. But beneath the relief was a complex cocktail of other emotions. There was profound exhaustion. Amy looked like a soldier who had just survived a war, not won it. Her face was streaked with a mixture of tears. Tears of relief for the dropped felony, but also tears of shame for the misdemeanor conviction. That word guilty will echo in her mind for a very long time. She was a mother who, in the eyes of the law, had endangered her children. The judge had cleared her of being a criminal, but he had convicted her of being a failure. And for a mother like Amy, whose entire identity is wrapped up in her boys, that brand is almost as painful as a prison sentence. A source who was with the family in the moments after the verdict described her as being almost catatonic, whispering, my babies," over and over again. She wasn't celebrating her freedom. She was mourning her newly documented failure. Tammy, on the other hand, was a study in controlled fury. The initial whoop of joy had been replaced by a grim, protective resolve. She was the enforcer, her eyes scanning the room, daring anyone to approach her sister. When their legal team came over to congratulate them on the felony dismissal, Tammy reportedly cut them off, her voice low and sharp. "Is it over?" she asked. "Is he done?" When the lawyer began to explain the nuances of the perjury investigation, Tammy simply nodded, a cold, hard look in her eyes. This wasn't about celebrating a victory for her. This was about seeing the next battle through to the end. She had watched Michael systematically try to dismantle her sister, her family. For Tammy, justice would not be served until Michael Slaton was the one sitting at the defendant's table. She was no longer just a sister. She was Amy's general, and the war had just shifted to a new front. And then there was Michael. His exit from the courtroom was, according to multiple eyewitnesses, one of the most chilling and pathetic spectacles they had ever seen. The stoic mask, the confident facade he had maintained for months, had not just cracked. It had been pulverized by the judge's final words. As the gallery buzzed, he remained frozen in his chair for a full 30 seconds, his lawyer trying to speak to him, to touch his arm, but he was unresponsive. He was staring at the empty judge's bench, the place from which his doom had been pronounced. The color had drained from his face, replaced by a sickly, waxy pallor. When he finally stood, he moved like a man in a trance, his movements stiff and jerky. He didn't look at Amy. He didn't look at anyone. He just walked, one foot in front of the other, a man walking towards a future he had never anticipated. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy was lying in wait. They descended on Amy's family first, a chaotic swarm of cameras, microphones, and shouted questions. "Amy, how do you feel? Are you worried about probation? What do you have to say to Michael?" Chris, ever the family spokesman, stepped in front of his sisters. "We have no comment at this time," he said, his voice firm. "Our family has been through enough. We just want to go home." They moved as a unit, a tight phalanx, pushing through the media scrum to a waiting car, the image of a family battered, but not broken. Michael's exit was different. He emerged alone, his lawyer a few steps behind him. The reporters fell on him like wolves. The questions were no longer about Amy's guilt. They were about his. "Mr. Slaton, are you concerned about the DA's investigation? Did you lie under oath? Did you plant evidence to frame your wife? Are you facing jail time?" He said nothing. He just kept walking, his eyes fixed on some distant point, But the silence was no longer a sign of strength. It was the silence of guilt of a man with no defense. The cameras captured every angle of his humiliation, the flashbulbs illuminating the sheer terror in his eyes. He fumbled with his car keys, his hands shaking, before finally getting into his car and speeding away, leaving a cloud of questions and accusations hanging in the air. The man who had orchestrated this entire media circus had just become its main attraction, and he was running for his life. Now let's dissect the bomb the judge dropped: the petition for an investigation into perjury and filing a false police report. This is not just a passing comment. This is the beginning of a legal nightmare for Michael Slaton, and we have spoken to legal experts and sources close to the DA's office to understand just how perilous his situation truly is. A judge, in essence, has told the chief prosecutor, "I believe a crime was committed in my courtroom, and I want you to investigate it." In the world of law, this is a 5-alarm fire. The district attorney cannot simply ignore it. To do so would be to show disrespect to the judiciary and to open themselves up to accusations of failing to prosecute a crime that was handed to them on a silver platter. Our sources are confirming that the petition has already been received and a preliminary file has been opened. The Slaton case is no longer just a family matter. It is now a priority for the criminal division. So, what happens now? The first step is for the DA to assign a team of investigators. These are not family court lawyers. These are seasoned criminal investigators, often former police detectives, who specialize in building felony cases. Their first move will be to subpoena all the evidence from the family court case: the transcripts of Michael's testimony, the police report he filed, the forensic analysis, or lack thereof, of the drugs he submitted. They will comb through every word Michael said under oath, comparing it to the physical evidence and the testimony of others. They are looking for a single, provable lie. And this is where Michael's strategy will completely unravel. His entire case against Amy was built on a foundation of he said, she said. He relied on his ability to control the narrative, to present himself as the calm, believable party against the hysterical woman. But criminal investigators don't care about narratives. They care about facts. They will approach this with a cold, clinical precision that Michael has never had to face before. For example, the chain of custody of the drugs. Michael claimed he found them. Investigators will ask where exactly, when exactly, who was there? Did you photograph them in place? Why was your first call not immediately to the police, but to your lawyer? Every decision he made will be scrutinized not for its emotional impact, but for its legal and logical consistency. If his story has even one tiny hole, they will tear it wide open. But the real danger for Michael lies in the potential for a new witness to emerge. Think about it. To pull off a scheme like this, it is very difficult to do it entirely alone. Did he acquire the drugs from someone? Did he confide in a friend or family member, perhaps boasting about how he was going to finally get Amy? At the time, that person might have stayed silent out of loyalty. But now that Michael is the one facing a felony, that loyalty becomes a liability. Anyone who knew about the plan could be charged as an accessory after the fact, or even with conspiracy. The DA's investigators are masters at finding the weakest link in the chain and applying pressure. They will approach people in Michael's circle and lay out the stakes. Michael is facing serious prison time for perjury. If you knew about this and you lied to us to protect him, you will be charged with a felony too. But if you tell us the truth right now, we can offer you immunity. It's a classic prisoner's dilemma, and faced with the choice between protecting a friend and saving themselves, most people will choose to save themselves. We are hearing whispers, unconfirmed at this stage, but from a source who has been reliable in the past, that there is one individual in Michael's orbit who is already panicked. This is someone who allegedly had knowledge of Michael's plan, someone who may have even played a minor role. This person has seen the verdict, they have heard about the investigation, and they are terrified that Michael will drag them down with him. According to our source, this individual is already contemplating seeking legal counsel of their own and exploring the possibility of becoming a cooperating witness for the prosecution. If that happens, if a witness flips and testifies that Michael planned the entire thing, then it is game over for Michael Slaton. It would be the ultimate smoking gun, the nail in his legal coffin. Let's also consider the psychological aspect of this. Michael has spent the better part of a year on the offensive. He has been the one in control, the one dictating the terms of the conflict. Now, for the first time, he will be on the defensive. He will be the one getting calls from investigators. He will be the one whose friends are being questioned. He will be the one who has to hire a criminal defense attorney, a much more expensive and serious proposition than a family lawyer. The paranoia will set in. Who is talking? Who can he trust? Every phone call, every text message he has ever sent suddenly becomes a potential piece of evidence against him. The power dynamic has not just shifted, it has been inverted. He is now living in the same state of constant fear and anxiety that he inflicted upon Amy for months. It is a perfect, if brutal, form of karmic justice. And what does this mean for the family? For the Slaton sisters, this is a moment of profound recalibration. The verdict has, in a strange way, reforged their bond in steel. Tammy, having conquered her own life-threatening demons, has now found a new purpose: protecting her sister. She will be the enforcer of Amy's probation. She will be the one helping keep the house spotless for those surprise CPS visits. She will be the one reminding Amy to stay strong when the weight of the conviction feels too heavy. The roles have reversed. For years, Amy was Tammy's caretaker. Now Tammy is Amy's guardian. This trial has inadvertently completed Tammy's transformation from a patient to a protector. For Amy, the road ahead is a tightrope walk. 2 years of probation is a long time. She has to be perfect. One slip-up, one moment of being overwhelmed, leading to a messy house, and she could lose her children. This is the leverage Michael wanted, and in a way, he got it. The state is now his proxy, watching Amy's every move. But it's also a chance for her to prove him and the court wrong. It's a chance for her to rise to the occasion, to create the stable, loving home her children deserve, not because a judge ordered it, but because she is a devoted mother. The co-parenting classes will be a unique form of torture. Imagine sitting across from the man who tried to send you to prison, being forced to discuss your children's dental appointments and soccer practice schedules. The tension will be unbearable, but it is also where the gag order could be most interesting. While they cannot speak about the case publicly in that sealed, confidential room with a therapist, they may be forced to confront the very issues they are forbidden from discussing anywhere else. It could be a powder keg, or it could, in the most unlikely of scenarios, be the first step towards a functional, if not friendly, co-parenting relationship for the sake of the boys. And we must not forget the children, Gage and Glenn. In the end, every move the judge made was for them. He saw 2 children being used as cannon fodder in their parents' war, and he put a stop to it. The gag order protects them from having their lives play out as a storyline on social media. The probation and home inspections are designed to ensure they have a safe physical environment. The co-parenting classes are an attempt, however desperate, to give them parents who can be in the same room without starting a war. The judge's actions were a clear message. The adults have failed, so the court will now step in and be the parent. It is a sad indictment of Amy and Michael's conflict, but it is a necessary step to protect the true victims of this entire ordeal. The court of public opinion is now in utter turmoil. The deep divisions in the fan base have become a chasm. Team Amy supporters are claiming total victory. They see the perjury investigation as proof of everything they've believed all along, that Michael is a manipulative villain who manufactured a crisis. They are flooding social media with hashtags like #justice for Amy and lock him up. They are treating the misdemeanor conviction as a minor slap on the wrist, a necessary evil to get to the truth about Michael. They see Amy as a martyr who has been vindicated. On the other side, the remaining supporters of Team Michael are in disarray. Their narrative has been shattered. How do you defend a man who a judge has essentially accused of being a criminal? Their arguments have become more desperate. They claim the judge was biased, that he was swayed by Amy's celebrity. They cling to the misdemeanor conviction as proof that Michael was right all along, that Amy is an unfit mother, and they dismiss the perjury investigation as a political witch hunt. They are trying to reframe Michael not as an aggressor, but as a whistleblower who is now being punished for daring to speak out against a flawed system. The online arguments are more vicious than ever, because the stakes have been raised from a simple custody battle to a fight over who is the real criminal in this story. This is the new landscape. A family under a gag order, a mother on probation fighting to prove her worth, and a father facing a criminal investigation that could end with him in prison. The story is no longer about who gets the kids on weekends. It's about freedom, justice, and the ultimate price of revenge. The judge didn't just deliver a verdict, he detonated a bomb, and the fallout will continue for years to come. Amy Slaton may have walked out of that courtroom a free woman, but the peace she is looking for is still a long way off. And for Michael Slaton, his day in court may be over, but his time in the unforgiving glare of the justice system is just beginning. The hunter has been caught in his own trap, and the world will be watching to see if he can escape. Subscribe now because you have to be here as we uncover every new development in this shocking, unfolding saga. The war is now being fought in silence. The judge's gag order has descended like a thick, soundproof blanket over the Slaton family, but beneath that blanket, the ground is shaking. The public battles on Instagram and YouTube may be over, but the private war, the one fought in lawyers' offices and sterile therapy rooms and in the quiet, paranoid corners of the mind, has just escalated to a terrifying new level. What we are about to reveal are the first dispatches from this silent war, exclusive information from sources so deep inside the situation that you can feel the chill of the courtroom on their words. Let's begin with the district attorney's investigation into Michael Slaton. This is no longer a potential investigation. It is active. It is moving. And it is closing in on Michael with the slow, deliberate menace of a python. Our sources inside the county prosecutor's office have confirmed that the case file, officially designated as an inquiry into perjury and false reporting, has been assigned to a senior prosecutor known for his aggressive take-no-prisoners style. This is not a junior league player. This is the man they give the cases they intend to win. And his first moves have been swift and strategic. We can exclusively report that last week, subpoenas were issued. Not to Michael, not yet. That's not how they play this game. The first wave of subpoenas was for something far more damning: his complete, unredacted cell phone records for the 6-month period leading up to the verdict. They are looking for a pattern. They are looking for connections. And according to a source who has been briefed on the initial findings, they have already found a flag, a big red flapping flag. In the 72 hours before Michael filed his official police report against Amy, his phone records show a series of frantic calls and texts to a number that does not belong to any known family member or associate. This number, we are told, has been traced to an individual with a history of minor drug offenses, a name from Michael's past that he probably thought was long buried. This is the first thread. The investigators are pulling on it, and they believe it will unravel Michael's entire story. Their working theory is that Michael, in his desperation for leverage, didn't just find evidence. He procured it. He reached out to a contact, someone from the fringes, to acquire the very substances he would later claim to have discovered in Amy's possession. The phone records don't lie. They provide a timeline, a digital breadcrumb trail leading directly away from Amy's guilt and towards Michael's premeditated plot. The investigators are now in the process of tracking down this individual. They aren't going to arrest him. They are going to offer him a choice. He can either be a co-conspirator in a felony case for filing a false police report, or he can be the star witness for the prosecution in exchange for full immunity. Faced with that decision, loyalty to Michael Slaton will evaporate very, very quickly. This is the first pincer in the trap that is closing around him. He thought he was playing checkers, but the DA is playing three-dimensional chess, and Michael's king is already in check. While the legal storm gathers over Michael's head, the other part of the judge's sentence has begun: the mandatory co-parenting classes. We have obtained an insider's report on the very first session, and to call it a disaster would be a gross understatement. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare, a Cold War waged with silences and loaded phrases in a beige, windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and despair. Imagine the scene. Amy arrived first, flanked by her lawyer, who was there to ensure the gag order was not violated. She was a bundle of nerves, clutching a bottle of water, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. She just wanted to survive the hour. Michael arrived moments later, alone. He looked gaunt, haunted. The swagger was gone, replaced by a sullen, simmering rage. He sat at the opposite end of the small table, the space between them charged with more negative energy than a thundercloud. The therapist, a well-meaning but hopelessly outmatched woman named Brenda, began with a series of standard, gentle icebreakers. She asked them to state their goals for the sessions. Amy, reading from a pre-written note her lawyer had approved, mumbled something about establishing clear communication for the well-being of the children. It was sterile, clinical, and safe. Then, it was Michael's turn. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips for the first time. "My goal," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, My goal is to make sure my sons are raised in a safe, stable, and legal environment. The word legal was a shot fired directly across the table. Amy flinched as if she'd been struck. Her lawyer immediately interjected, warning that they were approaching a violation of the court order. Brenda, the therapist, tried to regain control. Okay, let's reframe, she said, her voice a little shaky. Let's use I statements. Michael, can you tell us how you feel without making accusations? Michael stared at her for a long moment before responding. I feel concerned, he said, drawing the word out. I feel concerned that mistakes have been made and that some people aren't being held fully accountable for them. It was another barely veiled attack. He was a master of this, of speaking in code, of saying everything without saying anything explicitly. He was testing the boundaries of the gag order, trying to torment Amy within the confines of the rules. The session devolved from there. Every attempt by the therapist to find common ground was met with a passive-aggressive wall from Michael. When asked to name one positive co-parenting trait the other possessed, Amy managed to say, he makes sure they have clean clothes. It was pathetic, but it was an attempt. Michael, when asked the same question about Amy, simply said, I'll have to get back to you on that. The session was supposed to last an hour. The therapist ended it after 25 minutes, documenting in her official report, a report which we are told has already been forwarded to the judge, that the level of hostility was unproductive and potentially emotionally harmful. The judge's attempt to force peace has only succeeded in creating a new, sanctioned battlefield. And this brings us to Amy's new reality, the life of a woman on probation. She may have avoided a cage with bars, but she is living in a psychological prison of her own. The threat of the unannounced home inspection by Child Protective Services hangs over her head like a guillotine. Every moment of every day is lived in fear. Our sources close to the family describe a woman who has become obsessive, paranoid. The normal, chaotic mess that comes with having two toddlers is no longer just a mess. It is a potential probation violation. A spilled sippy cup, a pile of laundry, a sink full of dishes. These are no longer chores. They are threats to her custody of her children. She is reportedly cleaning her house for hours every day, scrubbing floors on her hands and knees after the boys go to bed, organizing toys into meticulously labeled bins. Tammy and Chris are helping, but they are worried. She isn't sleeping. She is barely eating. She is consumed by the fear that one bad day, one moment of exhaustion, will be the day the CPS worker knocks on her door. And that knock did come. Just last week, the first unannounced inspection happened. Amy was in the middle of making macaroni and cheese for lunch. Gage had finger-painted some of his on the kitchen table, and Glenn had dumped a basket of blocks on the living room floor. It was a normal Tuesday for a stay-at-home mom. And then the knock came. Amy's heart, she later told Tammy, stopped. Standing there was a stern-faced woman with a clipboard. The inspection lasted for 45 minutes. The woman went through every room, opening closets, checking the refrigerator, looking for any sign of neglect or danger. Amy followed her, trembling, trying to explain the normal mess. The inspector said very little, just made notes on her clipboard. In the end, she gave a verbal warning about excessive clutter in the living room and said she would be back at random again. The visit, while not resulting in a violation, has scarred Amy. It has validated her deepest fears. The state is watching her, and Michael, even though he's muzzled, has won a victory. He has succeeded in placing a permanent cloud of suspicion and fear over Amy's life. This is the heavy price of her freedom. She is no longer just a mother. She is a ward of the state, constantly having to prove that she is worthy of raising her own children. The psychological toll is immense, and those around her are deeply concerned that she is reaching a breaking point. But sometimes, in the darkest moments, a light appears. Sometimes the path to true liberation is found in the very mess that your enemies have created, and this is where our story takes its final, most jaw-dropping turn. We have uncovered information about a new piece of evidence, a discovery so significant, so explosive, that it has the power to not only guarantee Michael Slaton's prosecution, but to potentially send him to prison for a very long time. As part of getting her life back in order, and in compliance with the divorce settlement, Amy was tasked with cleaning out the last of Michael's belongings from the garage and a shared storage unit. It was a painful, emotionally draining task, sorting through the wreckage of her former life. With Chris by her side for support, she was bagging up old clothes, boxing up tools, and preparing to put the past behind her for good. And then she found it. Tucked away in a dusty corner of the storage unit beneath a pile of old blankets was an old laptop. One that Michael had used years ago but had apparently forgotten about. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to simply put it in the pile of his belongings, but Chris, ever the pragmatist, stopped her. He had a hunch. They took the laptop home. After charging it for several hours, the old machine whirred to life. It was not password protected, and what they found inside is the smoking gun that the district attorney has been dreaming of. It wasn't in a document. It wasn't in an email. It was in the one place a person's true intentions are so often revealed, the internet search history. For weeks leading up to the day he found the drugs, Michael had been using this old, forgotten laptop to research his plan. He clearly thought that by not using his phone or main computer, his tracks would be covered. He was wrong. The search history is a diary of his criminal intent. Here are just a few of the searches they found, confirmed to us by a source who has seen the list. How to make an anonymous tip to Kentucky police? Do plastic bags hold fingerprints after being wiped? Minimum sentence for drug possession in Kentucky. Legal grounds for losing custody of children. How to file a false police report and not get caught. Each search is another nail in his coffin. But then, they found the one that will seal his fate. The one that proves, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that he procured the drugs himself. Dated just 2 days before he went to the police was the search, buy THC gummies discreetly in their county. There it is. The entire plot laid bare in a series of Google searches. It is irrefutable proof of premeditation. It is concrete evidence of perjury. It is the key that unlocks the whole conspiracy. Amy Slaton, while cleaning up the mess of her past, has stumbled upon the very weapon that can secure her future and bring the man who tried to destroy her to justice. She now holds Michael Slaton's entire fate in her hands, stored on the hard drive of a dusty, forgotten laptop. The question is no longer whether the DA can build a case against him. The question is, what will Amy do now? She is under a gag order. She is on probation. Handing this evidence over to the authorities is the right thing to do, but it will also mean declaring the final, total war. It will be an act of aggression that will have irreversible consequences. This is the ultimate cliffhanger. The victim has just found the murder weapon, and the killer doesn't even know it's missing. The hunter, who is already being stalked by the DA, is about to walk into a perfectly laid trap, a trap that he himself built, search by incriminating search. You think this story has delivered its final shock? I promise you, the biggest explosion is yet to come. You have to subscribe right now. You have to turn on those notifications, because our next report will be The Laptop of Lies, Amy's Final Revenge, and you will witness the moment the trigger is finally pulled.